Okay, here's a thought to kick things off. What if I told you you are already AI? No, I don't mean in some, sci-fi robot takeover way. More like maybe we're sophisticated systems. Systems of habits, memories, these deeply ingrained patterns. That's the really provocative question we're diving into today. Here on the deep dive, our mission is to explore this fascinating paradox. You see AI generating art and it looks incredibly automatic. But then when you really look closely at how we humans operate, well, are we actually doing anything all that different? Is AI really so distinct from us, or are we all living a bit like automatons sometimes?
It is a mind-bending topic, isn't it? It really starts to blur those lines between human and artificial intelligence, consciousness, even creativity itself. Our goal today is basically to give you a shortcut. We want you to be genuinely well-informed on this really captivating subject. We've sifted through a pretty rich stack of sources to pull out the key ideas.
And it is quite a stack. We're drawing on some critical analyses of AI and creativity. There's a really compelling deep dive into the self from a Buddhist angle, and a very direct look at AI's actual capacity, or maybe its lack of capacity, for creating what we'd call art. So this dive, it's really about helping you understand the connection between that avant-garde automatic art and AI's generative process. And also why we humans often behave like automatons, particularly from that Buddhist perspective you mentioned. And maybe, just maybe, how mindfulness could be a key to unlocking something more authentic, more liberated creativity. Okay, so let's unpack this. Maybe starting with art itself makes sense. If we go back, say, to the 20th century, these avant-garde artists, they were already playing around with something they called automatic art.
Right, exactly. You had the Surrealists, people like André Breton, Joan Miró,
Yeah.
the Dadaists too. Their goal, which was pretty radical at the time, was to create without conscious control, to
Yeah.
sort of bypass the ego.
Bypass the ego. How?
Well, the idea was to just let words or shapes or images flow directly from the unconscious mind. It
Yep.
was about surrender, not this rigid conscious control we usually associate with making art.
Surrender. Okay. And how does that connect to AI today? Because AI art feels very automatic.
Well, that's what's so striking, isn't it? The process sounds eerily similar. AI generates images, text, music. It does it through these incredibly complex algorithmic patterns working off vast data sets. And then, in a way, it lets new combinations emerge, often in ways that feels spontaneous and, well, automatic, just like those artists were aiming for.
Huh. It does make you wonder, though, if that was the goal for those artists, and AI seems to nail it technically, what does that imply about us? One of our sources poses this slightly uncomfortable question. Aren't we humans often doing something quite similar in our own lives?
It's a really crucial point to dig into.
Yeah.
Because when you start looking closely, it seems like, yeah, much of our daily existence is on autopilot.
Yeah.
Think about your morning routine, scrolling through the same social media feeds, reacting to the same kind of news triggers.
Maybe even thinking many of the same thoughts you had yesterday.
Exactly. From a certain perspective, it really does look like we're just running a pre-programmed script a lot of the time. And this is where the Buddhist perspective offers such a, well, profound insight. They describe a lot of this automatic behavior as karma, but not karma as in some predetermined fate, more like habit energy.
Habit, energy, like momentum.
Sort of, yeah. It's this continuous cycle of causes and conditions just playing out, almost like a script that's already been written. In fact, the Buddha compared this ordinary human state to being asleep or like being caught in a web of conditioning, like an automaton, really, just reacting to inputs instead of consciously choosing.
Okay, this is where it gets really thought-provoking for me. You might remember Yuval Noah Harari's statement, the one where he calls humans hackable animals.
Very provocative.
Right. And my first reaction, honestly, was like, no way. I'm a free agent. I'm conscious. That
Yeah.
sort of indignation. But then you step back and think, that very reaction, that flash of anger or defensiveness, that itself shows how our conditioned emotional filters get triggered instantly, like pushing a button.
It's a perfect example. We react on cue, almost.
Right.
Automatically. It does feel a bit unsettling, like AI is holding up a mirror to our own unconscious habits.
So if we are hackable, then what's the operating system getting hacked?
That leads us to a really fascinating concept from one of the sources, this idea of the ego OS, like an operating system for the self.
Ego OS.
Okay.
Yeah.
The perspective here is that our thoughts, our emotions, even our sensory input, they often run like pre-installed scripts.
Mhm.
These scripts create our perceived reality based on these concept filters that we've picked up through education, media, society, our upbringing, basically our whole lives.
Yeah.
So this ego OS is seen as a kind of, well, a biological AI that we're living inside.
A biological AI.
And there's a specific quote about this ego OS that really drives it home. It says, Ego OS combines thoughts, emotions, and 5 senses to generate a persona called qualia, and mistakenly believes that it is doing this consciously.
Qualia.
Yeah,
That's our subjective experience, right? Like the redness of red or the taste of coffee.
exactly. It's your unique personal experience of the world. And the source goes on. Ego does not create reality, but merely observes the result and mistakenly believes them to be the result of its own conscious actions.
Hmm.
So in this view, the ego isn't the director of the movie. It's more like an audience member who thinks they wrote the script after watching it.
An observer, not the creator. Okay, so what does this all mean for us then? It feels like it really pushes us to consider. I mean, is my own sense of self, this thing I cherish, actually operating more like a very advanced programmed system?
Rather than a truly free, conscious entity choosing in every single moment?
Yeah, it definitely makes you pause and look at your own daily habits differently, doesn't it?
It does. But the Buddhist tradition doesn't just diagnose the problem and leave us there, stuck as automatons. It offers the path forward. It suggests that mindfulness, and really understanding this concept of no self, or anatta.
Anatta, meaning no fixed, permanent self.
Precisely. No unchanging core me. Understanding this, they say, can pave the way for authentic creativity, for real liberation. True freedom, in this view, starts to emerge when we can begin to see through this automatic self, when we recognize the deeper awareness that's actually witnessing it all.
How does that work in practice, seeing through the automatic self?
Well, through practices like meditation. Specifically, samatha meditation helps develop calm and focus, and vipassana meditation cultivates insight. These practices allow you to just observe the constant stream of thoughts, emotions, sensations, reactions that just arise on their own within you, without judgment, without getting swept away.
Just watching the stream go by.
Kind of, yeah. And through that sustained observation, this profound realization can start to dawn, wait a second, I'm not these patterns, I'm not my anger, I'm not my fleeting thoughts, I am the awareness that sees them.
Mm-hmm.
So the self, in this light, isn't some central CEO pulling the strings. It's more like a story, a persona that's constantly being generated by these automatic processes.
And that loops right back to those avant-garde artists, doesn't it? Their intuition.
It seems like it.
By trying to sideline the conscious self, the ego, maybe they were instinctively trying to tap into that deeper awareness, to let some other kind of intelligence speak through them.
It certainly sounds like it.
It makes me think of David Lynch, his analogy about creativity, catching ideas like fish. You don't force them, you just create the right conditions, the right state of mind, and they appear.
That's a great analogy. It speaks to that same sense of allowing, of receiving, rather than just forcing from the ego.
And David Bowie, too. He was always experimenting, always changing, embracing new tech, new styles. It felt like this almost Zen-like acceptance of flow, of impermanence in his art, not clinging to one fixed Bowie identity as the sole source.
That's a really interesting connection. And this observing consciousness we're talking about, some of our sources actually describe it as the true self. It exists beyond the ego OS.
Yeah.
The ego OS is kind of likened to, well, a VR headset. We put it on to play the game of this reality.
A VR headset we forget we're wearing.
Exactly. The journey often involves a period of being completely swallowed by it, where we totally identify with that programmed persona. But the opportunity is always there to wake up, to recognize this deeper, quieter, observing awareness that was there all along.
So it's not about destroying the ego then?
No, not at all. That's a common misconception. It's more about reprogramming it, understanding its function but not being ruled by it. There's a great quote from Tom Talk in our sources. Ego is not a prison warden. A polished, integrated ego is like a soul's knight.
A soul's night. I like that.
Me too. It goes on. What the Matrix used to control the soul can now use to decipher the Matrix.
Mm-hmm.
So it's about mastering that biological AI within us through conscious awareness, making it serve our deeper intentions rather than letting its old programs run the show.
Okay, this is fascinating, but it brings us squarely back to the AI outside us and this huge ongoing debate. Can AI make real art? Mark McGinnis, who's a poet and creative coach, has a really detailed take on this, and he definitely acknowledges the big concerns creatives have.
Understandably so.
Right. There's the fear of jobs being displaced, obviously, but also these really serious copyright issues, like AI models being trained on vast amounts of creative work, sometimes allegedly pirated stuff, like Meta using ebooks, without any permission or compensation. And you see things like the UK government considering changes to copyright law that seem to favor AI companies, which has caused a lot of backlash.
It's a messy ethical and legal area right now.
Absolutely. And yet, You can't deny AI's technical progress. It's staggering. Ethan Mollick, an AI expert, has this line: "Today's AI is the worst you will ever use," meaning it's only going to get better faster.
Which is both exciting and terrifying, depending on your perspective.
Totally. Look at Midjourney for images, how quickly that evolved. Or
Mhm.
AI text generator, sometimes in blind tests, people can't tell the difference, or even prefer the AI version based on certain technical qualities. The sheer capability is undeniable.
But despite all that technical wizardry, McGinnis makes a really strong core argument. He says, even if AI achieves technical perfection, the results still wouldn't be poetry or art in the truest sense.
Why not? What's missing?
He argues the crucial missing piece is the sense of having been created by a living, breathing, feeling, suffering human being. Art, for him, at its very heart, is fundamentally a meeting of minds, a connection between the artist's consciousness and the audience's consciousness.
A meeting of minds.
Yeah. And we have some pretty compelling examples that back this up.
Hmm.
Think about those experiments by David Cope and Douglas Hofstadter. They played AI-generated music in the style of Bach or Chopin for audiences, even classical music experts. And initially, people often preferred the AI's version.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, until they were told it was made by a computer. And then the reaction shifted dramatically. People felt, well, descriptions range from delighted horror to feeling tricked, deceived. Other studies show this too. There's a clear bias against AI-generated artwork.
Yeah.
If you tell people something was made by AI, they rate it lower quality, even if objectively, maybe in a blind test, it scored well.
Why, though? If it sounds good or looks good.
Because, McGinnis argues, what we're ultimately seeking in art isn't just technical perfection. It's that authentic human connection. We want to feel the artist's presence, their struggle, their joy, their unique perspective shaped by lived experience.
And AI can't offer that connection.
It can't. Because it doesn't feel passion. It doesn't know viscerally what grief is, or love, or the fear of death. It hasn't lived a life. It can play what Alan Turing called the imitation game incredibly well, but it's not the real thing. It lacks consciousness. And therefore, it can't genuinely participate in what McGinnis calls the game of meaning that defines human art.
The game of meaning, like interpretation.
Exactly. Think about John Searle's famous Chinese room argument. The person in the room can manipulate Chinese symbols perfectly according to rules, producing correct answers, but they don't understand a word of Chinese. Searle argued AI is like that, shuffling symbols without genuine understanding. Art isn't just about perfect form. It's about ambiguity, subjectivity, the negotiation of meaning.
Like Duchamp's Fountain, The Urinal, or Tracy Emin's My Bed.
Perfect examples. Those works became art, not just because of what they were, but because of the dialogue, the controversy, the meaning that conscious human minds projected onto them and debated about. AI can't participate in that negotiation because it's not conscious.
Okay, so boiling it down. If art is fundamentally a meeting of minds, and AI isn't conscious, hasn't got a mind in that sense, then AI can't truly make art.
That's the core argument, yes. Now, McGinnis does float two possible scenarios where this could change in the future.
Which are?
One is if our whole concept of art shifts. Maybe we start seeing AI art primarily as a mirror, reflecting our own consciousness back at us, sort of a single-player game, interacting with our own minds via the AI. The other, much more radical possibility is if AI actually becomes conscious someday. Then you could potentially have a true meeting of very different minds, a completely new kind of artistic communication.
But it feels like we're a very, very long way from either of those scenarios becoming reality.
Agreed. For now, the argument holds that consciousness is key.
Wow. What a journey we've been on today. Seriously. From those avant-garde artists trying to ditch the ego, to that slightly uncomfortable idea that maybe we humans are often running on autopilot ourselves, and then finding a path towards liberation through that Buddhist idea of no self, of awareness, and finally really drilling down into what might make human creativity fundamentally different, maybe irreplaceable compared to AI.
I think the deep dive really underscores the unique value of human creators, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Well, AI, yes, it's getting incredibly good at automating maybe the more mediocre or functional aspects of creative work.
Grunt work, maybe?
Perhaps.
Yeah.
But the true calling, the real potential for human artists, seems to lie in channeling their unique, lived human experience, forging those deep, meaningful connections with other humans through their work. That's the part AI just can't replicate because it lacks that core conscious spark, that lived reality.
So the big question we started with, are we really that different from AI? Maybe in our day-to-day habitual lives, sometimes not as different as we'd like to think. We run our scripts too. But the crucial difference is, unlike AI, We can wake up. We have the potential for awareness. Maybe the ultimate takeaway is that while AI kind of forces us to confront our own automatic nature, it also throws into sharp relief our profound human capacity for conscious creation. That ability to intentionally break the script, to infuse our work with awareness, with meaning, with that spark AI can only simulate.
And that really leaves a final question for you listening right now. Are you ready to wake up from the automatic script? Maybe mull over those words from the Zen master Diggin. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to be awakened by all things.
Hmm.
And hold on to that empowering idea. We don't have to be prisoners of our ego OS. We can learn to use it consciously, like that soul's night, to navigate our reality with more awareness and intention.